Welcome to the Nerd Tutorial Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials on nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today, myself, is your nerdy Tutor George, and here with me today, Full Yarn Mom?
Full Yarn Mom? Hey,
you know, Alchemist, maybe, I guess.
How would we do that? Full Yarn Mom or full
Yarn Alchemist, or the Yarn Alchemist, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe.
I could be the Yarn Alchemist.
We could go with the Yarn Alchemist. So, we are continuing our conversation and semi-experiment here on Full Metal Alchemist and kind of seeing the difference between what is the original source material, which is the original manga by Harumi Arakawa, and then its original 2003 incarnation of its anime, its eventual 2009 incarnation of anime, and the 2017 movie. So yeah, what a...
Okay, just let us start here.
Oh, no, we're not starting with the movie.
We're not starting with the movie.
Oh, no. Movie I've got opinions on.
Yeah, you didn't even... Okay. Anyway. Okay, so the manga, I watched while riding the stationary bike. I read while riding the stationary bike and was able to... And actually the way you had it on the little hard drive worked really well because I was able just to slide through the pictures, which meant I was trying to read backwards. So you might want to explain how traditionally manga sits in a book.
Okay, yeah. So oddly enough, traditional Japanese reading in obviously American English and Western English, words are read from left to right. So a sentence structure would start from the left to the right. This is typically how you also read comic books as well. So it usually starts in the top left-hand corner, and you progress either to the right or down, and typically you always go to the right first and then go down from there. And so the idea being is that when you read an American comic, you start from the top right and you eventually find your way down to the bottom leftmost panel. Well, Japanese write don't necessarily write backwards, but they write down, and so a lot of their writing structure goes down.
It's columnar.
It's column. It's based like on a column. Now, In a lot of cases, they will write horizontally like we do in English, but their comics, though, start from the top right-hand corner and end at the bottom left-hand corner. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to train yourself to do it initially, but once it happens, once it does happen, like it's just automatic. Like it's one of those things where like you just immediately understand it.
Okay, so I sit on the stationary bike for an hour a day, well, until I get 20 miles, which is usually like 64, 65 minutes. And it took me 3 days to get through, which I thought wasn't bad.
So how much did you read?
I read 3 of the file folders full. Okay,
so you got about 60 some odd chapters, I want to say.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you got a lot further in it.
Yeah. So, which helped because if I hadn't done that, I would not have. I think the anime would have been harder to watch.
I think the anime wouldn't necessarily have been harder to watch, but it feels a lot more rewarding. I think having read the manga and then being able to understand, this is what's going on, and this is what it looks like animated in a lot of cases. Which is a lot of the benefit, which is a lot of the fun in having read something for a long time and then watching it and thinking, so that's how this fight played out, or that's how this scene looked.
Yeah. So I got past Hugh's death.
Yeah.
Okay. So I found myself every morning having to retrain myself the manner in which you read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by day 3 I was, okay, right. So it is a little for me. A little. It takes a bit of an adjustment. It takes me maybe 2 or 3 pages to get into
the mindset.
Where it's just natural to read it. However, once you've got a couple pages in, your mind just kind of adjusts to reading it that way. So just a note for those who are trying to do this for the first time: just be aware. It's read in the other direction, and it tends to be more columnar and up and down.
Yes, so a lot of times, so there's a very popular manga format called what they call a 4-comma. 4-comma, which is a Koma, which is A very
not comma.
not comma but coma, but it's a very popular style of Japanese comic format because it's basically a so usually it takes up like kind of half the page sort of thing,
Right.
and it basically is a very short 4-panel joke, not unsimilar to like a Peanuts or a Garfield sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so they outline like pretty much an entire joke on there. It's a huge popular format because you can kind of put it in the margins of magazines and other stuff that comes out.
A lot of the short jokes are done that way.
Yes, so yeah, a lot of the and a lot of manga,
And we'll explain what that means.
yeah. So, but no, yeah, I was actually that's awesome that you got that far in because that's a.
I put some time into this.
No, I was very excited. I'm trying to remember how far. Because it's been a while since I've read the manga. I reread about 20 some odd chapters here yesterday to remind myself. So.
Okay, so my observations of the manga. This is actually a storyline that carries well in black and white, and the manga is to me stylistically more pleasing than the anime because it strikes me as more steampunk.
Yeah. It's a very steampunky sort of thing at the end of the day.
It's more so to me it was more so in the manga than it was in either of the anime.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that I thought the way it was drawn was really imaginative.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things. Especially when you get to the very early chapters, and especially you get to later on, it gains a lot more kind of maturity, sort of a look to it. But it keeps having this very beautiful, very steampunky sort of environment and world at the end of the day.
It's just kind of cool.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it just is kind of cool. And some of the things that they're able to do with Al, and the way he's drawn in the manga, I found really.
Because yeah, so it typically what they'll do is that like his face, the helmet itself doesn't change at all throughout the entire thing. But depending on the kind of the way it's angled, sometimes will convey emotion, and then for some of the sillier stuff, like they'll do it as a chibi portion.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of chibi in this, and there's a fair amount of chibi in the anime as well.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the newer one.
In the newer one, yes. Not so much
in the older one. Yeah. So, and do you want to explain what chibi is?
So chibi is this a super deformed look now. In some cases, it can be highly detailed. It's typically not all the time. It's usually
a face could be just a circle with 2 X's for the eyes,
mm-hmm.
and an O for the mouth.
And sometimes just like a little element of the hair.
Yeah.
So in Ed's case, a lot of times it's just his little bangs that kind of come out, and then his ponytail on there, and then that's just his chibi face for a lot of times. It's usually meant to be a comical sort of way to say like, this is meant to be a joke, and we're having a little bit of fun here right now.
I found it was used most to express lighthearted anger.
Yes.
So anger that was, again, the short jokes frequently result in that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's got a problem with that.
Yeah. But, you know, it's used at certain times to sort of break tension.
Yes, very much.
And that was true in the newer of the 2 animes as well, the Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, yeah. It's the chibi sort of comical sort of elements are meant to break up what is a very somewhat like dark story. But I mean, like, but what I like about the story is that it's really kind of like it's very ringing. It rings very true at the end of the day. And it feels, and while it's not, while I don't think it ever was intentionally meant to be
analogous.
And no, I think it really was meant to be analogous to some things. I don't think it was necessarily analogous to certain actual events or anything. But I do think that it was meant to be, you know, I mean, very obviously. So the Liore incident that happens to be the very first chapters is really kind of all about, you know, the corruption and manipulative power of religion at a certain point.
There's some very anti-religious things in there.
Oh, throughout the entire thing, yeah.
And I teach Sunday school, you know. So some of it I found. I wonder what people's take on that was. So there are some. Yes.
No, they don't. They don't go directly after Christianity or any.
They don't.
Any religion.
They don't define what. They don't define actually what religion that is. They don't define it as Buddhist or anything. It's Leto.
Yeah, there's Leto, and then there's the Ishvalan religion as well, and then obviously there's like the slavish devotion to father as well.
Yeah.
And so there's elements here and there of it, but there's never. They never
outright said.
They never outright say it, and I think that's actually intentional to not upset anybody and to make the antagonistic sort of viewpoint here. Because again, like it's very easy to say that the people from Amestra are the white guys at the end of the day, and then you have people from Jing that come in, which are very much the Chinese Eastern influence, and then you obviously have the Ishvalans, which are very much representations of what could be Native Americans or even Middle Easterners, Mexican people. It very much feels like Amestris is a colonial America.
Okay, so I felt like the Ishvalans were immigrants.
Yes, very well. So initially, while they're in Amestris, yes, but I mean, like
in their own land,
in their own land, their own thing. At the end of the day.
Okay, so enjoyed the manga the most, which surprised me because it's actually more work.
It's a lot more work, but it feels. I think it feels a lot more rewarding because you stop when you feel that you're done. Versus like the anime was like you stop when we say you're done, and this is how much you're getting at this particular point. So you could often feel.
I thought the and we've talked about this before. I think this is true of a lot of anime, is that it doesn't necessarily have to complete the package in order to terminate that particular episode.
No, there's a lot of cases where it very much does. I think the 2009 version is better of resolving certain arcs quicker in some cases versus the 2003 version, and I can explain that a little bit more when we get to that. Okay.
Well, but I mean, I think my overall observation would be not a soap opera, but like a soap opera in that the thread is constantly running, and it doesn't have to come to a conclusion or leave you on a cliffhanger or any of those things in order to complete the episode. So I didn't necessarily I felt like, okay, I've watched 4 episodes and they're 25 minutes a piece or something like that.
About 20 to 25 minutes about 20 minutes if you exclude the openings in them.
Well, and Netflix very nicely does that for you.
Oh,
they flash through it. They give you a little bit of the opening, but it's not a full opening, and they don't give you hardly any of the credits.
No, yeah.
Works well for me.
Yeah, no, especially if it's one of those things where like you're watching it, if you're binge watching it, and especially in that particular case, like that intro, almost all intros and outros are about a minute and 30 seconds each. So it's like, it's cool like the first 1 or 2 times you see it, but after a certain point you're just like...
You don't need it.
No. Then it just becomes a barrier. It's like, okay, all right, I'm going to go get something to eat real quickly and then I'll come back. Or it's like, okay, I need to just keep going, skip the intro.
I never felt like I necessarily had to complete an episode, although I think I did complete them all. I don't think I resumed in the middle of any episodes. I did in the movie. I had to take a break, but we'll get to that. But I do feel like it flows nicely. I didn't feel. I felt like it was easy to stop and start.
Oh yeah, no. Again, that's what I really like about manga is that it's very easy to be able to kind of like just pick it up and go until you want to stop, or until you're reading it online and they say, yeah, you got to wait a month. You got to wait, a month for the next chapter.
Yeah.
So again, if you can imagine, like when you finish one chapter and you move into the next, that you're waiting, in some cases a full month before that chapter comes out next, if you were reading it when it came out. So.
But I didn't feel like it would leave you anxious.
No. Arakawa did a very good job of
Yeah.
Arakawa did a very good job of trying not to have a lot of cliffhangers at the end of her episodes, and so. Or the end of her chapters, and always made it feel as though, like, okay, I know what I'm getting into when I come back, and I'll just
pick up the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I appreciated that about it.
Oh, absolutely.
But it is tense.
Oh, it's very tense. I mean, did you have any questions going throughout the thing here?
It took me a while to figure out what a chimera is. That's not. I think that's
That's
enough
not a
of
common phrase that you would hear a lot.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that it's probably something that's a recurring theme in Japan that probably doesn't need explanation. But for American audiences, it took me a while to figure out what a chimera was.
So chimera is kind of actually something from from European folklore, and so a chimera is supposed to be the head of an eagle, but the body of like a lion, it's a tail of a snake in some cases.
Oh wow!
And so those come around, come around every so frequently in some flags in some cases, or sometimes it's the body of a. This also might be known as like you might think of it kind of like a griffin as well, where you've kind of got like, the body of like a unicorn, but like the head of it might be like a hawk or an eagle. Certainly in World of Warcraft, we see, well, though we don't call them chimeras, we call them just griffins. At the end of the day, like it's literally like the body of like a lion with wings on it, in a lot of cases. So I mean, like we fly around in those practically every day.
Okay, so you gave me a new explanation because I'm thinking it's somehow animating.
It's kind of like in the case of chimera, it's kind of like joining two souls together and to make a new thing at the end of the day.
Okay.
And often cases like, and again, especially when it comes to alchemy, this is one of those things that was kind of in alchemy. I'm really, a lot of the cases here, a lot of the stuff that Arakawa did for the research for this, like Van Hohenheim, like is mentioned as a former alchemist in some textbooks in some cases as a teacher or as a instructor.
So it's a reference to somebody who's genuine.
So it's a reference to something, I think,
to a real person,
into like a 13th or 14th century books in some cases. But I love the idea of the chimera in this case. In the Japanese version, is really just saying, "Oh yeah, we merge two animals together to make a new animal that's very beastly and angry." And in later versions, you're mixing a human into a animal. One with a very dire consequence, and another one in which it actually almost feels to their benefit in some cases, because in later episodes, there's some characters that can appear 100% genuinely human, and then they kind of like power up into like these animalistic sort of forms. So one of them's a lion, one of them's an ape.
So let me tell you where I went with that. To me, I made the analogy to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Yeah.
That's where I went with it. Because they, as you put it, they power up.
Mm-hmm. They power up, and again, they look very normal and very kind of generic after a certain point, but then they like hulk up, and they're just suddenly like, oh my goodness, the old man with glasses turned into a lion, and his partner turned into an ape, and there's another one that's a boar, and another one that's a frog, or some sort of toad of some sort,
Yeah.
So they literally power up.
Yeah. So that's where I went with that mentally, was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
And you're not wrong. I mean, like, henshin or changing is a big thing in a lot of shows in some cases. I mean, like, I could point you to any number of Japanese shows that made. I think the one that probably made it the most popular would have probably been Kamen Rider, which came out. So keep in mind that when the original kind of Super Sentai series came out back in the 70s, which is a lot to do, again, thanks to Spider-Man.
Okay. I'll buy that.
Well, so Marvel licensed Spider-Man to the Japanese to come up with, so they could come up with new shows based off that, and the idea was to eventually take what the Japanese had done and transfer it over to the West to give new material for Spider-Man. The Japanese Spider-Man drives a car, is Japanese, not Peter Parker, but Japanese. Okay. Also is a agent of hell.
Hold it here. Okay, Spider-Man is like the most, I mean,
I know.
Aunt May, and I mean, he's like so pure.
So,
Petey Parker.
So like the Japanese version of Spider-Man ditches almost 99% of all of Spider-Man legacy and lore and everything. And so the only thing that's really the same as Spider-Man from the American version to the Japanese version is kind of the costume and powers.
He's the satanic Spider-Man?
He's an agent of hell, but he's doing the job. But he's doing the good guy job. Yeah, this is also where he came. Like, his powers come from a spaceship as well.
He wasn't bitten by a...
wasn't bitten by a radioactive spider. He actually met, like, an alien who took the human form and gifted him with a spider bracelet, which is where his entire costume comes out of and changes into, and all of his web-shooting stuff comes out of his bracelet.
Okay.
Out of his web. Again, it's weird because, again, he also has a giant robot for when the enemies get giant, which is where the Super Sentai series got that from.
Okay. So our whole thing here with the Super Sentai series is that
changing is a big deal. So henshin, morphing as we know it here in the West, a big deal that comes up fairly frequently throughout the entire series. I think it probably got in anime culture definitely became the basis for a lot of Sailor Moon. Literally would spend probably spend every episode about a minute to a minute and a half of just transforming into the Sailor Scouts.
But it's so pretty.
Okay. The one thing I will remind everybody about that is that in the West they have kind of a seizure-inducing sort of background on all the skin that kind of is meant to hide all the skin and transformation. In the Japanese version, they're completely naked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when they're transforming, and they're moving around, all the ribbons and everything that are going all over their body, that's literally going all over their body onto their skin initially. It obviously very much omits bits.
Yeah.
Bits and bobs in there, but they're, again, my understanding, and again, it's very hard to find the original Japanese footage for Sailor Moon because of nudity rules on Japanese on YouTube as an example here. But again, they're supposed to be naked when they're going through that.
Okay, so just as an overall comment, and first of all, in Japan, walking around, you very rarely see women dressed seductively. Attractively, but not seductively.
Very attractively in a lot of cases.
No, there's no cleavage hanging out.
There's no cleavage, not a lot of collarbones. They dress very conservatively, but pretty.
But very, very attractively. But it ain't nothing to go into a public bath, something that would be. I mean, I've seen women be prudes in showers here, at the shower at the Y. They're all covering up with towels as they're going into the actual shower stall, which is silly. But whereas in Japan, you're sitting out there.
So I'm showing a picture of Sailor Moon where...
Yeah, she's naked. Cool. So
not necessarily cool, but like...
when I went into a public bath the first time, grabbed a towel as I came in and was covering myself up with, I took off my clothes and then was sort of draping the towel over me to walk out to the bath, and I was going to lay the towel on one of the stones, and the attendant took it from me and sort of mimed to me that wasn't how you just walk around naked, and I was fine with that once I got used to it. I walked in front of a dozen women watching Mount Fuji sunrise in a naked bath, and by then was like, this is how it's done. So there's a very different concept of nudity and awareness of body.
Not a lot of body shaming, I think, in Japan, with the exception of tattoos. But often the reason for but the logic for tattoos, and I think is because usually it would only be yakuza and gang members that really kind of heavily tattoo themselves. It's. So there's a logic in that aspect there necessarily, but yeah, I mean,
it's a different awareness.
It's a different awareness, and I think it's very much a.
It doesn't really enter into this manga though, because we don't see any nudity.
You do see some nudity.
Oh, with lust.
Not necessarily with a little bit with lust, but you also see a little bit with Al's original body though too.
Oh, you do, yeah.
Because he is Okay, so there's an interesting question that I had for you here. Is that what did you think of the um, scenes here with the Gates of Truth?
Okay, so
Because I found that to be a very interesting sort of aspect at the end of the day that could be
it
taken
is.
very spiritually and very in a very different in an interesting way.
And I would tell you it's the one distinction between all three of the visual forms,
Hmm.
between the two anime and the movie, is the way the Gates of Truth are handled.
Yes.
And that's the one thing that really separates them to me.
Hmm.
Okay, so going back to the storyline, they basically risk their souls essentially in order to try to bring back their mother,
Yes.
and in doing so, they bare their souls, and Al's soul is bonded to the metal suit
Hmm.
by Ed giving up his arm,
Yes.
and there's a trade there that he very quickly does.
Hmm.
And when that happens, my interpretation was when that happens, he sees in that bargain things he isn't supposed to see. And he's like 12 when that happens, and Al's 10.
No. So when they do the original transmutation of their mother, they're about 7, 8 years old.
Okay, they are young. Yeah,
Maybe, yeah. I want to say about 7, 8 years old, and so they don't realize that they're actually using their souls.
they're still innocent, but
They're still
they
very
do
innocent.
discover it when they're in the process.
While they're in the process here, they do, you see it initially from Ed's point of view, in which Ed arrives at this door,
Yeah,
and there's this weird figure that kind of looks like him, is a silhouette, but not really him. And he gets pulled into his gate of truth,
you're right.
which is interesting because that is an old picture that's found in alchemy books based off of how they think certain things work. You see that actual literal the image that's on his gate, the same as with Al, who has a different version.
Right.
Both of those actually reappear, or have actually been in the Japanese anime Evangelion before, so I recognize them right away. So they're semi-biblical, but it's also alchemic sort of things.
And here's what I'll tell you is the first time I saw it, what my mind went to was I was at a very remote ruin still being restored in northern Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a site that is so newly discovered and being restored that there are no hotels. In order to go visit it, you have to, because it's quite a ways away from anything, you have to do a homestay. You literally stay in somebody's house, and
Yeah.
it's a very poor village, so you're literally sharing open floors with them. But in there is a depiction of a Buddha with 36 arms. And the first thing I thought of when I saw the Gate of Truth with all the
Little arms that are kind of coming out of it, the little black little things.
well, not even just the black little things, the door itself
Mm-hmm.
was that figure with 36 arms. I'll show it to you.
Oh yeah. And so when Ed gets brought in there, he's literally in the process of being deconstructed, and it's just things are just going right into his head. And when he comes back out, he's like, that's what that is. It's basically the Matrix downloading knowledge into your brain.
Yeah.
But then the price for doing that, though, to getting all that particular knowledge here, was Al's body and soul, and also one in his left leg. So when he comes, and then when they come back out of the door of truth here, they are Ed with all of his.
Well, Ed bargains.
Not necessarily, not initially. Ed, not initially about that. He's asking, like, as a 7 or 8 year old would, like, let me back in. I want to see all the stuff. There's like, no, you paid. You got as much as what you paid.
Yeah.
What did I pay? And then he finds out that's when he lost his leg.
Yeah.
And then he goes back.
And this is back to the equivalency.
In the equivalent exchange, which comes up very frequently.
Frequently, yeah.
And again, we'll talk about that when we get to the anime here, because it becomes an annoyance at a certain point.
Yeah.
But when we get to he goes back a second time, and he literally, makes a bargain for his arm to get back Al's soul into.
He's all I've got.
He's all I've got and everything. And then there's eventually, so that's kind of an interesting sort of aspect there. And then again, obviously the entity that's in there quotes himself as being, I am the world, I am the universe, I am you, and I am everybody, I am God, and I've had many names, essentially.
Yeah.
Which, again, I find very interesting kind of an aspect, because it's like, it's not homogeneously religious at the end of the day, but it certainly feels as if, like...
It's the universal God.
Yeah.
It's the universal truth.
It feels very, not atheist, rather, but agnostic. That there is something else out there, but nobody really understands what it is.
It opens up the possibility, which I thought was interesting,
Mm-hmm.
that in us all is the possibility of being God.
Yeah.
Which is it's a very Buddhist
aspect at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I enjoyed when he returned there, because he returns there in dreams.
Well, so he doesn't necessarily return there in dreams. He goes back. There's at least one other time in which he goes back there, in which he is he's accidentally eaten by gluttony, and so gluttony so Ed, Ling, and envy are stuck inside gluttony. Now, gluttony, when he was made by Father, was meant to be a pseudo gate of truth.
Yeah.
And because he was meant to be a gate of truth here, like, he has kind of the abilities of the gate of truth, but not really. So anything that gets sucked...
He totally lacks insight.
Oh, yeah, no. So, like, it's like the TARDIS here. Like, the inside is bigger than the outside.
Yeah.
And in order for Ed to escape out of... Ed, Ling, and Envy to be able to escape out of there, what they end up doing is they end up using Envy's Philosopher's Stone that's in his body, to open up the gate of truth and kind of travel through it here. So he's literally, when he uses it here to travel through it, he travels through it and he gets back into this void world initially. And that's where he sees Al's body at.
Okay, so the void world, that's, okay. So that's why I was confusing with being back in
the dream.
In the dream, yeah.
Yeah, so and he sees Al's body there, and Al's like, sorry, I can't come with you. And he's just like, I'm sorry, like, I want to, but I can't come with you. And Al eventually, I think, does it too at one point, much, much later on in the series, is slowly getting back to his body with his soul, but it's not immediate sort of thing. But that's much, much later on.
But Al never grows up.
Al doesn't. No, the body actually is kind of growing, but it's very kind of sickly and anemic for the most part. Like, it's very, like, there's
it almost looks feminine.
No meat on the bones is the best way I would, because I mean, and this is also true if you see later on in the series, stuff happens, and I won't say it anymore. There's spoilers on there. So
there are spoilers on there.
There's a lot of spoilers.
Yeah, because I was going to say something and then went, oh no, you can't say that because that'll ruin it for somebody who hasn't experienced it.
And again,
I don't want to.
Yeah, and so. So the one thing I did want to also ask you about is, what did you think of Hugh's death? Because this is the moment. So when this originally aired back in 2003, Hugh's death and his funeral was the moment in which I cried for anime, and I was the first time I ever cried in an anime. Because it was just
it's pretty devastating.
Well, and so what ends up happening,
and you don't, and I didn't understand right away
why it was happening.
Who had committed the murder?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it was Envy that committed the murder. Right,
but I hadn't originally understood that.
Okay, yeah, because Envy's ability to shapeshift is not well portrayed in the manga, I think, immediately, because, again, like, it's kind of hard to show shapeshifting, I think, without something else. And they do a much better job of it in the animes, I think.
It's actually the one place in which I thought the movie did well. I would tell you that...
The movie did it well, too, yes.
Yeah, I would tell you that the movie did that extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one. We can talk about the movie later.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's move on to the 2003 anime. Now, so what I've done here for the podcast notes here is I've outlined kind of the first kind of 12 some odd chapters, so the first 3 volumes of the manga here, essentially. Which outlines a lot of the first kind of 8 to 10 episodes of both series here. So for the 2003 anime, you got up to about episode 4 or 5, I want to say, maybe.
Yeah. So, and I really enjoyed it, and I liked that it. I thought made good use of the relationship with the grandmother and Rinrei.
Rinri and
Rinri.
Grandma Panako.
Right, and a good explanation of how they build
The relationship and how they build up the arm and all
the arm
automail.
and the leg, automail, and how that was functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the portrayal of the army officers because he is Ed is a state alchemist,
Mm-hmm.
which means that a lot of this centers around figures that are in the military.
Yeah.
A lot of the storyline, and I thought that the portrayal of the military in that particular version of the anime was seemed more fitting, more natural,
Yeah, I think
less forced.
a
More
lot
what
less.
that relationship might be.
Yeah.
If you likened the relationship to somebody who might have been working on the atomic bomb in the 40s.
Yeah, I think, and there's a lot of state alchemists in the series which are very much just researching arms.
Right.
And then there's a lot of other alchemists that are very much like, no, I'm pretty much a weapon, but like I command an army when I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I accept my role. And you see and you see the different I sat there thinking back to Oppenheimer. So because in some ways this is analogous to maybe the creation of the nuclear bomb, in that you have alchemists who can create these weapons that and have already created weapons that
Can do quite a bit of damage.
And this is the whole reason for Scar.
Scar basically exists because of state alchemists being set into a region to do stuff, and essentially Scar being, Scar, I think, with all rational thought here, would be justified in his murders, and he certainly feels that he's justified in his own
I like
mind.
the depiction of Scar better in the more recent in Brotherhood.
Yes, we all do.
Okay. Just saying.
Yeah, in the 2003 version, like you get kind of an early sense of him, but like it's later.
He's not fleshed out.
He's not as well fleshed out. He's very young in that particular aspect. Versus when you, when the 2003 anime came out, the first 2 episodes follow the Liore incident almost beat for beat. It's almost a perfect representation of it.
And then they deviate kind of from there.
So the flashback scenes of how Ed and Al did their thing at the end of the day kind of takes apart over several chapters. Usually about
like
the
4
first
or 5.
Well, they kind of hint at it throughout like the first
Yeah.
kind of 11, 12 some odd chapters when rereading it.
Yes.
But in 2003 anime, they basically just do the entire thing right then and there. So they go through the entire backstory there of how...
That's actually my favorite. Okay, so of the 3 visual, that is my favorite depiction of that, because you actually you get where Winry comes from.
You get where Winry comes from. You also kind of get a little more time with Trisha Elric as well. So
yes.
You get to kind of... So you kind of feel a lot more when like it happens, like it's...
What the loss really is.
What the loss really feels like, yeah.
Yeah.
And this was one of the benefits of the 2003 anime was that, again, keep in mind that when the 2003 anime came out, when it was coming out, when the production had started on it the fall of 2002, the manga only had about 12 chapters that came out for it already. And the story was nowhere near being completed either. Like, Arakawa made a very big point of saying, like, this is expected to go for a while. And so...
And there I liken it to Game of Thrones.
Yes, very much Game of Thrones. And so... and this is actually a very good example of what kind of happened with Game of Thrones, too, is that they reused a lot of the elements from the manga as often as possible, but then after a certain point, it deviates. And the deviation point is pretty much right after the Hughes and Rockbell Town incident here.
Yep.
So after that point, it starts deviating quite a bit from that point. But by that point in the anime, it's also episode 25 and 26 of 50 episodes.
Yeah.
So what normally took about 10, 12 chapters worth of material, which basically covers from the very beginning of the story until what I would say is like the 5th laboratory incident, is covered in the anime is covered in the 2003 anime here. Takes about 12, 13 chapters to get through, versus in the 2009 anime, a lot of that stuff is actually just covered in about 6 to 7 episodes. So there's a lot of...
Which I would... Yeah, so I found myself having more affection for Al and Ed.
Because we got this... Because it felt like you were spending a little lot more time with them. And
you knew who they were. And you had this sense of... you had compassion for what their loss was.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing logically as a mom I kept thinking is, why aren't they living in some? They're living by themselves.
Mm-hmm. They're living by themselves, but I mean, like
they're getting fed by grandma.
You're getting fed by grandma, and Rinrin just kind of around the corner.
Yeah. So it is. So I felt like. Because the way it was laid out, I felt like the earlier series was more affectionate.
I think that's also because they were trying not to run out of the manga material that they had already created at the end of the day, and they were trying not to get too far ahead. Because again, keep in mind is that when Colonel Hughes dies at the end of the day, we're pretty much into I think like chapter like 15 or so, I want to say, give or take, somewhere right around there.
Yeah.
Which while it's still a big part of the story at the end of the day, I mean, like, comes like about halfway through the anime, and then from there it goes. Again, the 2003 anime goes a lot different. So where in the 2009 version that stuff goes really quickly at the end of the day, though.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that at the same time. Is that, and this is one of those reasons why when I recommend Fullmetal Alchemist, I always tell people, watch the 2003 version first, then watch the 2009 version.
Because you've developed the relationship, you understand who they are.
That too is that a lot of the cases, like, you get to experience the characters, enjoy the characters a lot more, as you get to understand the relationship, how Ed really cares for his brother and Al. You know, at the end of the day, all Al really wants to do is get Ed's body back to normal shape.
Yeah. Versus
Ed, who all he wants to do is bring his brother's body back in general.
Right. Advantages of the anime over the 2003 series. I liked that it was steampunk. I liked the style.
I think you got a lot more sense of the style in the animes than you do in the manga. That is very much this is a steampunk world. There is electricity and there is stuff going on. What I like about it is that in the world setting, it's that Ed and Al Ed was born in like 1899, so like this is like reminiscent of like 1910 kind of esque technology. Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases, we're like, oh, there's automobiles, but they're very kind of steampunky looking. And there's electricity, but like it's not a common thing. Like a lot of people just use it for lights and
you don't really see vehicles in the anime.
No, not very commonly. You know,
not very common.
You might see like the Jeep or something every so often, but there's a lot more trains and stuff like that.
Yeah, you do see trains. So I liked that, but I think in the anime, I really got a sense of how childlike and what a child Al was, because Al was voiced by a
child throughout the entire
thing. Yeah. And it really brought home the idea that even though Ed grows older, mm-hmm. Al doesn't.
No.
Al always retains and sees everything, and so you have the irony. It highlighted the irony that Ed is older, shorter, not threatening looking at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, he's the firecracker at the end of the day.
Well, and you juxtapose that against Al, who is in a suit of armor, is a walking, talking suit of armor, which in itself is imposing and intimidating.
Especially the design of the armor too. Like
And
literally got spikes on
he's
shoulders.
got a horn.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a horn, like
a unicorn horn.
Yeah. So he looks intimidating. He's huge, and he's the one who's the innocent, forever child.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't a Peter Pan type child either. There's nothing malicious in him. He's a very pure soul. He's not
a nice guy.
He's not sarcastic or sardonic, both of which Ed is.
Oh, Ed is like full teenager versus Al, which is kind of like it almost feels as though Al is the older brother while Ed is the younger brother.
He has so Al has wisdom beyond his years in terms of how he sees the world, but at the same time he sees the world in a very naive, childlike way. He sees certain truths that children will always see, that adults lose.
Well, I think what's also interesting from his vantage point as well is that we have to remember that Al's only working with a couple senses at the end of the day. He's only working with sight and sound.
Oh, there's a scene in which he says he can't feel the rain.
Can't feel the rain. He can't feel warmth.
And you just want to cry because
you just want to reach out and hug him.
Yeah, because he's sitting there. It's raining, and he says, what I would give just to feel that on my face, to feel the rain on my face, and you really feel for what it must be to be trapped, infused. It isn't like his body is inside the suit of armor. His body is the suit of armor.
Literal suit of armor. And you get cases where people are literally hiding inside of him in several cases.
Yeah. He's hollow.
Yeah, and again, I mean, and I think it does a great job in the 2003 anime as well, as that we see that Ed sleeps, but Al basically stays awake all night long.
Because he's a suit of armor.
Because he's a suit of armor, and he doesn't need to sleep, and he probably doesn't remember what the concept, doesn't even
So he's aware, he's also aware of when Ed goes into that sort of, it's not really a nightmare, what would you call that? In his dreams, Ed goes to the void.
More or less to argue and kind of
and sees
the world and the truth, or everyone typically calls it the truth.
Okay,
so the entity is being the truth.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty scary thing.
I know, yeah.
It's kind of and it's interesting the way it's depicted because it's kind of a fuzzy particulate
thing at the end of the day. And
yeah.
then when he gets both when he gets both Edward's arm and leg here, it's literally like becomes a part of it at the end of the day, because it is him at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah.
Which is certainly very interesting because...
so you're having conversations with himself.
Basic conversations with himself.
With an older, wiser version of himself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and again, so that's certainly a somewhat interesting aspect. The one thing, though, that differs in a lot of cases is that the 2003 version doesn't include the Gate of Truth at all.
Yeah.
So the 2003 version, when Al, all the alchemy, all the kind of like hidden symbolism and everything that goes on behind that is not actually explained at all to Ed at all, and so a lot of that just kind of happens. And even where Ed figures out that he can do his special transmutation sort of thing here, which is clapping his hands together, he eventually figures that out later on in the anime versus in the 2003 anime. It's one of those things where
it becomes his weakness as well.
Oh, very
because other people figure out that he needs both hands to do it.
Oh yeah.
And then that means you just take out that automail arm, and
then he's basically down for the count. But he doesn't even know that he can do that until much later on in the 2003 anime, because it goes through his past before he becomes a state alchemist.
Right.
Versus where in the manga in the 2009 anime, like the second he comes back out of the Gate of Truth and he's back in the real world, he immediately recognizes that he can do the clap and do that. Yeah. So I found that to be certainly very interesting. And again, it's interesting because the 2003 incarnation, I think is really useful because it tells a slightly different version of the story that is still very approachable and useful at the end of the day, is antagonistic to certain other things that happen there. So Which again, I think we're watching.
To me, it was interesting to see where somebody might take it if they didn't have the roadmap.
Yes, and that's very much what ended up happening. Now, when we get to the 2009 anime, they move along real quickly.
Okay, so the 2009 anime doesn't let you build that affection for Al and Ed.
No.
And it doesn't explain Winry really
until almost like episode like 6 or 7 later on. So you almost have to wait. If you were watching it weekly, you would almost wait like 2 months before you ever met her again.
Yeah,
or saw her.
Yeah, and so you don't get that, which I found disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't build the relationship with Grandma.
Nope.
At all. And so you don't get that. So I think you lose some things that cause because at the end of the day, both Al and Ed are very moral.
Oh yes.
And you don't get a sense of
where that morality
comes from,
mm-hmm.
how that's developed.
Yeah.
I think in the 2009 version. So I found that disappointing. Now in the 2009 version, the other thing I would say is I didn't get the sense of the appropriate relationship between the military officers
and the state alchemists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, one of the benefits,
they were kind of separate entities, and whereas in the 2003 version,
they were very much you work for us.
You work for us, but they're also trying to support. The colonel's very clearly trying to support
Ed and Al for the most part, and even the Fuhrer is very much kind of like, hey,
let's get you back to your
true selves, and let's get you back up and running. Get back out there.
And what it struck me as is that equivalency. You're going to work for us, and you're going to do things for us, and they send Ed off to deal with all sorts of criminals and
mm-hmm.
and all, but they also have compassion for them and want to see them made whole.
Yes.
And they try to enable that by making introductions to different people who, in the end, end up not being necessarily good people. But
no, we're good.
In the end up not being very good people, but at least the military to me in that particular setting is sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that's warranted by the time you get to the end is a different story.
Yeah. So in the 2003 version, the military is more of a supporting element versus the 2009 original manga. It's very much an acting sort of thing here.
It is,
and I think that.
But I don't get in the 2009. I don't get the sense of the symbiotic relationship, and in the 2003 version, I do.
But I think that in the 2009 version, you very much get the impression that we see state alchemists as tools, and we're going to use them when we want to. We haven't needed to use an atomic bomb in a long time, but we have it in lying and waiting. Just in case we ever have.
But there are lots of references to what it did in Youswell and understanding where Scar comes from. So let's get to the next thing.
Okay.
Scar.
Okay.
In the 2009 version is a fully fleshed out
villainous sort of creature.
Yeah, but you get
But you have a lot of sympathy
for why. Yeah. So it isn't like I would compare him to maybe the Joker and Batman.
Oh yeah, that's a great example. Because the Joker and I would say the Joker and Batman in a lot of cases. I'd actually probably go a little further and say he's probably Thanos from the Marvel movies.
Yes.
He's got
excellent analogy. So
because he has an understanding of how things work, and he has a belief at the end of the day. And at a certain point here, you're like, if you listen to him long enough, like, you know what? He's not wrong.
Yeah.
But the way he's going about it is. But at the end of the day, the ends justify the means to Scar at the end of the day, much like it did to Thanos. And Thanos' understanding was like, the world has a finite set of resources, so there has to be something done to make sure that we don't have to do this eventually. And unfortunately,
we don't become self-destructive because we've overpopulated. And so in that same way, Scar recognizes the horrors of Youswell and understands how the military is using the alchemists.
Yeah.
And therefore is hell bent on killing all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I found him a much better character in the 2009 anime than I did in the 2003.
Yeah, and so in the 2003 anime, you only get kind of an initial portion of him. It's not until many episodes later, I think after episode 10 or so, when they really start picking back up the story again, that you really get to understand more about Scar, and you get to see the full version of Scar again.
Yeah.
But the 2009 version really does show Scar as he's portrayed in the manga, which is very much this like force of nature that's not wrong in his logic, but he is wrong in his approach. But that he's very much kind of like I'm here. Let's go out. Like I'm here.
Deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, what I've also kind of found interesting is that the way
he is totally unrepentant.
No,
there's
absolutely
no remorsefulness. There's no sense of sorrow.
No, it's as if for the most part here, he's made peace with himself. Understanding is like, I understand that I'm going against the Inchfall teaching. That's why I've given up my own name and go by this weird alias at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm doing is not right, but what I'm doing right now is justice, not necessarily, the correct thing to do by my religion. Because the Ishval religion is very much kind of like the turn the other cheek sort of thing here.
Yeah, it's very Buddhist.
It's very Buddhist and very Christian at the end of the day. Yeah. But even Scar realizes that, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing is not right, but it's the thing that makes the most sense for justice, and it's the way I'm coping with whatever pain I'm going through too.
He justifies it, and I found his utter lack of remorse disappointing.
Yeah.
So there's that.
He gets better.
He gets better? Well, that's good.
Yes, he gets better.
Okay. So what I didn't like the way that Hughes was portrayed in the 2009. I found him much too jokey and.
You don't get that sense of like this is a father figure sort of element here,
you don't get the sense that he's going to care for these people. You don't get the sense he's more comic relief just for the sake of comic relief rather than being.
You also kind of lose what kind of like aspect where he is, because again, Colonel Hughes is in the intelligence branch of the military,
right? So
like, despite this kind of very jokey sort of like demeanor that he has, he's actually a very, very smart individual at the end of the day that knows whole loads of stuff that most people wouldn't even consider remembering at all. And I think in the 2003 version, because a lot of it takes place with a lot of flashbacks to kind of earlier stuff, and they have a lot more time to,
flesh things out.
Yeah, and again, I mean, like, we spend the better part of 25 episodes for about 6 months with with the ability to kind of appreciate Hughes.
He has Al and Ed living in his home. He has a wife. She's expecting. He's got the little daughter. The dog. He's a real person. So, and this leads me to my overall observation between the 2003 and the 2009.
Mm-hmm.
The 2003 is more character driven. The 2009 is more action driven.
More plot driven. Very plot driven. And the benefit is, and again, this goes back to my reasoning why I recommend to watch the 2003 version first, is that you get the sense of this relationship with Ed and Al, because a lot of what was going into the 2009 version was this kind of understanding and appreciation that, this is the relationship that they have, so we can focus more on what was the original plot of the manga. Because the manga, while again, like, you have 45 to 50 pages every single month that come out that give you the sense of these characters' relationships.
Yeah.
But when they were translating that to anime here, like, they were trying to also condense what ended up being 108 chapters into about 63 some odd episodes. 64 some odd episodes. They were moving at a very brisk and very, quick pace, despite the fact that
to me it feels much more action.
Yeah. Very much action, and again, they're moving around very quickly.
So an overall comment about manga
mm-hmm.
is that we tend to think of comic books as being they really are action driven. Unless you're reading Archie, they are action driven, and they don't spend as much time developing characters. They're about story.
Yeah.
And if you're going to read manga, you have to kind of let go of that concept, because manga actually does spend a lot of time with the moral aspects of people.
Yeah. What's really nice about the manga form here that you don't get a lot in the anime.
But I mean, true of lots of manga, though.
Lots of manga, absolutely. Yeah, lots of manga spend, depending on the themes that are being driven in there, spend a lot of time more on discussing sometimes morality of what we're doing and the efficacy, or even just like, the nature of like, hey, here's what we're doing right, or like, hey, this is what we're doing in some cases.
A lot of moral dilemma.
Yeah, and again, in some manga, there's a fair amount of manga which is very much kind of the notion of like, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do to protect other people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And how far do you go to protect other people as well?
But a lot of that's an ethos that is especially highly regarded in Japan too.
Yes.
It's why Japan has no problem wearing masks, and
because they're already hyper aware of everybody else, and so they're very much attentive of the notion of, oh, I'm doing this to protect other people. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to be in anybody else's way or hurt anybody.
Exactly.
And that goes through like a lot of different stuff here. I mean, like even in sumo wrestling, like, which I found kind of which I found so fascinating at the end of the day. Like I go back to there's this white guy. He's a Bulgarian. He's amazing. Took on a Japanese name to become a sumo wrestler.
That's pretty cool.
Oh my goodness, and it was so cool. There's a couple other guys, white guys like that too. Not as commonly, but he's one of the more well-regarded sumo wrestlers. And so, but again, it's very much this very kind of hierarchy in that they don't go out and help each other up when they lose, but like it's very much kind of a respectful sort of like, I lost, okay, moving on. Okay, I didn't do well this time, I bow, and I'm great and gracious in my defeat. Again, I love that entire mythos about the Japanese culture here. I think it's such a well-ingrained sort of thing here. So yeah, again, this is one of those times in which I say, watch the 2003 anime, then watch the 2009, because a lot like what was House of Cards, which was originally a British show, if you watch the newer version that came out on Netflix before you watch the older British show, you're not going to be able to appreciate and enjoy the British show at all. Mostly because also I don't understand the House of Commons and British government at the end of the day, but Parliament here. But like, it is one of those things where like, if you watch the 2003 version, you get a lot more already kind of re-ingrained understanding of how these characters act and appreciate each other and how they work with each other. So that if you just wanted to find out what was the original plot of Full Metal Alchemist in the anime form, you could get through that. And later chapters or later episodes of the anime do slow down quite a bit after Hughes' death. So the one thing I did want to also ask you about here real quickly was, and I know the 2003 version does it a lot better than the 2009 version, but that's Shou, Tucker, and Nina.
Okay. So, and it's actually one of the places where I actually liked the movie.
Because time feels like it moves. My thing was in the 2003 version was that you felt like you spent a lot of time with Nina and Shou, Tucker, so you could appreciate their relationship at the end of the day. You could appreciate how much they cared for Nina at the end of the day, and you were far more capable of, like, oh yeah, like we're like big brothers to her, and we really care for her.
Can we talk about what happens to Nina? Because that's like a moral dilemma.
And yeah, and again, keep in mind that, so Shou Tucker is known as the Sewing Life Alchemist, because he once created a chimera that could talk. Now, it could only talk for a couple minutes, and then it killed itself.
It says, it literally says, I want to die.
Yeah.
and then it starves itself to death.
Yes.
And later you understand why.
Yeah.
Although they never explicitly talk about it, but you do understand it.
Well, you do realize who it was.
Oh yes,
Yes.
Yes, and then yes, and so later you understand why.
Yeah, you
And they walk you
understand why.
through that very slowly. And I thought the 2003 version did a much better job of that because you actually see them play. In the 2009 version, you see them play.
You see them play, but again, what happens over the course of... In the 2003 version, there's two... It's almost broken down to 2 episodes, and they spend a lot of time... they spend a fair amount of time kind of showing how Ed and Al are very, studious sort of things, because when they go to the library, they're like instantly
they're just lost in the library.
Lost in the library wanting to read and learn.
Yeah.
And that you spend a lot of time, because it also goes over how the state alchemist examinations and everything, and how they got to that point.
And the sewing alchemist is first of all, this is where the compassion comes in with the military, because the military makes that introduction and takes them there.
Mm-hmm.
The colonel takes them there because he thinks that the sewing alchemist, who has created a chimera who could speak, might have some ability to...
might have some knowledge or some cross-compatible research that could help them get their bodies back.
Right. So the 2003 version explicitly says, leaves Al there for a short period of time.
Well, Ed goes to do the state alchemist exam.
Yeah, right. And leaves Al there. And that's pretty critical, actually, because the sewing alchemist Tucker learns from examining Al.
Yeah.
And you see him examine Al and realize how Al is fused.
Yes.
And the 2009 version doesn't do that.
No, but the 2009 version also stays fairly faithful to the original manga as well, because they just they get there. They seemingly feel like they're there for maybe a week or so.
Yeah.
And then after the end of the week here, they make a point of saying that, oh, hey, your state alchemist renewal thing is coming up, so you got to show why it's still beneficial for us to keep you as a state alchemist.
And he actually says earlier that he has to keep his state alchemist designation because prior to that he has a nice house.
He has a very nice house. It's a big house, and he has a daughter, and the entire point of
and his wife left 2 years ago. That's very important.
Wink, wink, not judge.
Huh?
Wink, wink, not judge.
Yeah. So in the end, or as part of that conversation, he says, "I had nothing. We were very poor."
Yeah, he can't fathom going back to that former lifestyle at all.
Yeah, so he has to do. He didn't get a very good review the last time, and he has to be able to show that he's progressed.
Yes.
So he's feeling a lot of pressure, and he mentions it several times.
Oh yeah, it feels very much and again in the 2003 version you really feel for him because you see him as this nice father figure, but you see that he's clearly overworked and that Nina...
He feels stress. And
that Nina doesn't have an outlet to play with him at all because that's just not an option here. And so that you very much feel for Shou Tucker in the 2003 version. Now, when we get to the 2009 version again...
And you're shocked.
Yeah, you're almost shocked that he even did it. I think part of the problem...
We're not going to tell them what he did, right? Are we?
I think it's okay because, again, it's been out for a long enough. It's been out for...
Okay.
Keep in mind, this got done in 2002, 2003.
Because I was really shocked.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, so at the end of the day here, because Shou Tucker is pushed to a corner...
he feels the pressure
he feels the pressure to be able to prove that he deserves to be a state alchemist still.
His research is moving along.
Yeah.
It's progressing.
It hasn't stalled at all. It's still moving.
He's learned from watching Al.
Mm-hmm. That he basically makes a chimera out of Nina and
no. Okay. So he makes a chimera, and let's slow this down. He makes a chimera, and we don't know what the chimera is made of.
But he's very excited that he's made the chimera.
And the chimera can have conversations with you, simple conversations, and Ed and Al get there, and they go look for Nina and the dog to play with. and they can't find Nina and the dog. Then Tucker shows them very excitedly this dog-like chimera, and the chimera talks to Ed,
Mm-hmm.
and then the chimera describes Ed as a big brother.
He calls Big Brother. Yeah, he calls him Big. The Chimera calls Al Big Brother and makes a point of saying, "Let's play again."
Let's play again, and then
that's when you start kind of like realizing.
Oh gosh, what? Oh gosh, and I'm like, oh, he didn't. He did, and he made the chimera out of his daughter and his dog, and you can't undo that.
No.
And suddenly, they flash back, and Ed asks, "So, when was your last test? 2 years ago. When did your wife leave? 2 years ago." And suddenly you understand why the chimera said,
"Kill me."
Kill me.
Yeah. And much like the 2009 version and the 2003 version here, it's Scar that does this it does this deed, but I believe he does it because he understands that, like, so at some point here, like, the Nina chimera runs out of the house and finds Scar, who's just kind of sitting about, and Scar recognizes that, like, oh my goodness, you were one of you're what has happened to you. I can tell that you're two different souls in this, malformed body here. Which, I mean, to its extent, I mean, like, it kind of looks like a dog, but kind
of looks like a Chinese lion.
Yeah, very much actually, and yeah, that's a good example actually. Scar recognizes what's happening here and decides, you know what, I'm going to do you a favor and end your misery for you.
Yeah, he actually makes it as a gesture of compassion.
Yeah, and so you see that, like, that Scar has some understanding of what's going on, and this is again very much true of both the 2003 version where it's in the past and he's just kind of figuring himself out here, versus in the 2009 version, like, he is, like, already this ruthless killer, but you see this side of him, and it's like, yeah, I know, I understand that you're hurting, and I understand you're in pain right now. Let me go ahead and fix that for you, and let me put you out of your misery for you.
Yeah, so he makes it an act of compassion, and I actually didn't ascribe it to pain, but as a knowledge of these few souls are just morally wrong.
Yeah.
He sacrificed his daughter to keep his certification.
And again, what's going on early here is that Arakawa is really trying to show the point here of, this is what happens when you dive too deeply into your science and forget that your science is meant to help humanity.
When your science loses morality.
Yeah, and at the end of the day here, like, at a certain point here again, I mean, like, and Shou Tucker says the point of this, like, I did this all for my wife and my daughter at the end of the day, and yet they were the ones that he sacrificed to do it at the end of the day.
So then the other interesting conversation as part of this is Ed rightfully is appalled and is
very upset,
and because they were like
brother and sister for a period of time,
and is shouting accusations at Tucker, and Tucker turns around and says, "Who are you?
Who are you to describe that to me? I know what you did,
and Ed comes back with, yes, but I was a child. I was
a child, and I was naive, and I didn't understand the full ramifications of what I was doing.
Yeah,
you were an adult, and you knew very well what you were doing.
So it's sort of separated. I think it's the first time you actually get a verbalized separation of, yes, I did the wrong thing. Yes. Alchemy forbids, because alchemy forbids.
It's taboo. They make a big point about saying it.
It's taboo.
And that the people who do learn about it, that they have done it here, is very much kind of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you actually did
it comes up in the very first couple of episodes, where
Father Cornello is very much kind of surprised, like, oh my goodness, you actually did it.
Yeah,
You madman,
whereas
you did
he's
it.
been faking doing it.
Yeah, so he's been
And
faking it.
bringing people back to life, but not really.
Yeah.
Faking it. He has a fake philosopher's stone,
Mm-hmm.
which amplifies your alchemy.
Yeah.
And he's able to recreate somebody's voice, but then they go away.
Yeah, they move away for whatever
They move
reason.
away, and as it turns out, nobody ever actually saw them. They only heard them.
Or they saw him in silhouette behind like a bed or something.
A drape or something. And it wasn't real. It wasn't full.
Yeah.
But Father Cano's like, you actually did it.
Yeah.
And because it is so taboo. But it's the first time you ever get Ed, I think, actually verbalizing.
We understand what we did, and we know what we did is wrong.
And we wouldn't do it again, and we've paid a price for it.
And we will never do that again. And essentially.
And that actually plays into the ending too.
Mm-hmm.
We paid a price for it, but we were children. And I thought it was interesting to see that conversation.
Oh yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's a later portion of the series here where Father is collecting his
The real father or the fake father? Fake father.
So the character Father, which is the homunculus, not
Yeah.
von Hohenheim, who was their actual father,
Okay.
is, and again, I don't mean to spoil this here at the end of the day, to a certain extent, but he's collecting people who have done who have done human transmutation for a special event.
Yeah.
And he makes a point of communicating this later on, because again, Ed and Al's teacher has also done human transmutation as well, which is how she got some of her powers at the end of the day too. And so Father makes a point of kind of going out of there saying, it's like, everybody lost something that was very actually kind of symbolic of what they were doing here. So like, Ed lost his legs because he wanted to stand up on his, Ed lost his legs when he did human transmutation because he wanted to stand on his own 2 feet and follow in the footpaths of his father and other people.
Yeah.
Al wanted the love and embrace of his mother, so lost his entire body, which feels no warmth or feeling at all.
Has none of those senses.
Yeah. Their teacher here, and I apologize, the name is escaping me at the moment, but their teacher wanted to bring back her child, which had, died during stillbirth, and as a result, they took away her womb essentially in her body, so that way she can never give birth ever again.
Yeah.
And so like, it's interesting how like the truth actually, and he makes a point.
The law of equivalency.
Yeah, and it's interesting that truth makes that Father makes a point of saying that like, at the end of the day here, like you all did something very taboo, and they took something that what you really wanted at the end of the day.
Valued,
they took it.
Yeah.
They took it from you.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't realize that's what you were having in there. And then we get to the 2017 movie. which felt like it took something away from me too.
Okay, so it's like 2.5 hours long.
So it's 2 hours 15 minutes long.
Feels like longer.
I have issues with this movie.
I had to break it down into 2 pieces. I couldn't even watch it all at once. Okay, let me give you my issues, and then you can see where yours are.
Okay.
You get absolutely nothing of any sort of relationship with Winray or the grandmother. It does nothing to develop any compassion for...
You see Trisha for all of like 4.5 seconds, and then it's like...
It does not worry about character development. It is worried about getting you through the plot lines as quickly as possible. And let me tell you, first of all, my first problem with it. I have emotion about this.
Okay.
The music absolutely sucked.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Okay.
my God. So the music...
No. I'm going to show you this real quickly. What is my first line on there?
Yes!
So my first line here on my notes here is that strange dissonance with music choices. The first couple minutes, like you're watching.
Are we watching Power Rangers? It is music that okay.
It's music that feels like it belongs somewhere else.
Let me back up.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the anime and say there were times I saw touches of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay.
In the anime. It sometimes felt like it had that style. Especially the 2009 version felt like it was paced kind of the same way as Yu-Gi-Oh, which your younger brother watched,
Mm-hmm.
and was a diehard. At one point, I knew how to play because whatever you guys knew how to do, I knew how to play.
Yes.
So, I would harken back to different sort of Sentai and Japanese anime genres.
Mm-hmm.
The music took me to the Power Rangers. It was bouncy. It was lighthearted. I mean, these aren't like, this is a dark thing. It was bouncy. It was lighthearted. It was almost jokey. It sucked.
Again, the very, a lot of my notes were I was literally writing it as stuff was happening.
Yeah.
And one of the notes here I had was that
your first note is
again strange dissonance with music choices because
Yeah.
again, I mean, like the very first scene feels like oh, you're out on, because so they open up on the farm where Trisha is hanging up the laundry before she kind of like faints, and that happens, and the scene there is where Ed and Al bring out these horses that they've made with nearby stuff, and they've transmutated to show off to their mom, and their mom's like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so proud. You guys are going to grow up just like your father."
Yeah.
You know,
you are your father's son.
You are your father's sons, and this music that's happening here seems like, the music in this case here sounds like something's going to come out of the house and eat Trisha Elric.
Oh, that's true.
And even like the way they're showing the alchemy here, like it looks like a body horror sort of thing is happening with all the stuff, and the way it swirls, and it's so ominous and
particulate,
violent, and the music fits up perfectly with the way they're portraying the alchemy here, because it feels very, in the anime,
it's ominous.
It feels very ominous in the way it moves around. Feels very much like a tornado is trying to eat you or something. And versus like the 2003 and 2009 anime kind of show it as kind of like Lego bricks almost getting moved out and then re-put back together in a certain pattern.
Gives you very much the feeling of destruction and reconstruction.
Yes. As where this very much feels kind of like a whirling mess kind of happens, and it reconstitutes itself back into this other thing. So it's more like if you were on the bridge of the Enterprise and you were being teleported. Yes. Yeah.
It felt like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so it just feels so. It's just the musical choice here feels as if like something ominous and weird is going to something ominous and villainous is going to happen here, and oh my goodness, these children are coming out, and the music choice would make perfect sense in the case of what happens afterwards, but like you don't really even need music here. You can just have like a light background, sort of like nice kind of airy sort of feel to it, and you would be perfectly fine. And again, I have a lot of problems.
It's a spring day.
It's
she's
a spring
hanging
day,
laundry.
ever so nice, and then you don't need the music to be ominous. It's very much feels like
it doesn't need to foreshadow.
Yeah, and again, I mean, then can we talk about being the kids when they do the human transmutation get Wizard of Oz?
That's a perfect description.
I literally, I was literally watching it. I was just like, and I literally thought to myself, I paused. It's like, I've seen this somewhere before. This is the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
This is Dorothy getting caught in the house, swirling up a tornado, and then landing somewhere.
It is the perfect description.
Felt exactly like that. And I think the reason for that was because again, in the anime here, you see, especially the 2009 anime, you see how their bodies get deconstructed, and broken down. And I don't think you really wanted to show that as kids.
Because there's blood involved.
Well, not only so much that there's blood involved, but so much as that you don't want to see, I would have a hard time with somebody torturing a kid in a movie.
Okay, and that brings up my first question.
Okay.
That I had about the movie was...
Were the kids getting tortures to do those acting scenes?
No.
Okay.
Oh, God, the acting's so bad. The acting is just so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Just universally, although a couple of characters I'm okay with. But my first question that I had was, what is the age group of the audience? Was this meant for tweens? Who is this intended for?
I,
My guess was it was for not even teenagers, because even teenagers go, that really sucked. 12-year-olds.
oh no, I wouldn't even gauge 12-year-olds.
Well, it's got some fairly big moral dilemmas that you certainly wouldn't put in front of younger kids.
I think this movie was aimed at people who already liked Full Metal Alchemist.
Well, okay, I get that, but it certainly wasn't intended to be marketed for an adult audience.
No,
It's so poorly acted. I mean, it's Saved by the Bell type acted.
I think it's even worse than that. I would wager that this was a movie created by committee and by studio mandates, because there is a number of scenes throughout this entire movie that are very reminiscent to what actually happened and show off these really kind of great poses, like the pose where you first see, Ed's full arm with his coat kind of ripped off and shredded when in
the scene where he's attacked by lion or whatever that is.
Yeah, and then you see, and then you have that, there's.
I think there are things that are depicted well. I like the way that gluttony and lust are depicted.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I've heard conflicting things about those characters, but if you go back to the original source material and you were told, and the studio mandate was make it as close to the original as possible. Like, I'm sorry, gluttony is about as close as you get to gluttony at the end of the day, even down to like.
But Cornello's nothing like Cornello.
No, Cornello's nothing like Cornello, and even
and because Cornello's part of the opening, that right there kind of shattered me.
Well, I was really kind of annoyed with this notion, especially in the very beginning. Was like, I'm okay with kind of getting in at kind of immediate medias res kind of into this situation here, but like, why is Father Cornello running away from Al? He's supposed to be like the big head honcho in this entire city of Liore. He's supposed to be pointing, everybody else to go murder the heretics and Ed and Al.
Yeah.
Why is he running?
And you don't get that scene where the village people say, "Well, we thought you were good guys, and here you are."
Well, and you also lose the fact that Ed,
you lose a lot because you just only have 2 hours and 15 minutes to deal with a lot of storyline.
Really
so you move on, and some things had to be sacrificed, but you lose some scenes that really are character development.
And again, I mean, one of the most defining things I felt that you lost here was that one of Ed's most defining features is that he is clever and that he is very smart. That's how he became a state alchemist. You don't get state alchemist just on skill alone. You have to be smart too. And the fact that Ed tricks Father Cornello into exposing himself, you don't get that at the end of the day. You just get, you get this little kind of half-handed, like, is this your precious, guy here, a knife that's holding up a girl? And the other thing that really kind of bothered me as well is that, why is Father Cornello running if everything he does to stop Ed is not, like, literally just pushes them back, like, literally, like, waves of concrete bricks and then all these pillars coming out of the wall. Like, you can clearly stop him. Why are you running? Why aren't you fighting him?
I lost it with the fact that he just didn't look anything like Father Cornello, and that would have been an easy character to recreate.
I'm okay with it. My thing at the end of the day is that I'm okay if the characters don't look like who they originally were supposed to be, as long as they inhabit the look at the end of the day. Like, I would be okay, at the end of the day here, like, he wasn't
a charismatic figure.
No.
And Father Cornello
is
a very charismatic figure.
Yeah. This wasn't my Father Cornello.
Yeah. So to me, he wasn't at all charismatic, and that is what that role is.
And I'm also kind of slightly disappointed here in Ed and the actor that played Ed, because of that god awful wig that you can clearly tell was a wig. And that, like, so.
Well, you can do. I mean, you could say a lot about that. Were these the people that I envisioned from the anime? In a lot of cases, no. In other cases, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Hughes, was well chosen.
I think Hughes was well chosen. I also think Roy was kind of also well chosen.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the person who plays Rinri has
she
the right
had no
idea.
Role. Come on.
She has no role. She has no purpose being there. She's being dragged around from place to place.
She's this in the anime, she's this sort of unspoken love interest.
She's this emotional back support to these
guys. She's like, their lifelong friend.
She's a part of the trio, even though it's really a duo.
but she's the person who came, who maintains the automail. She takes care of him, and there's a bond. She's like the one constant that's always there for the brothers
to come back to.
Yeah,
and she's also representative of what they're aiming to get back to as well.
Yes, exactly. And she has like no role in this.
She has no agency at all. She's just literally the only reason she's here is just to kind of do the iconic scenes of, oh my goodness, Ed, you broke your arm. How could you break your arm here? I have to.
You did this again. Now I have to. Yeah, but she has no
purpose.
Yeah.
No, she's.
How do you off like a main character like that?
Well, again, I mean, a lot of this in. I will admit that the way they kind of handle Shou Tucker here is a little bit better as well.
Actually, okay, so
we can go back to that. Here,
okay, so my one, the things that I liked in this movie that I thought they did well, Shou Tucker, I thought they did that extremely well.
Yeah, because you can. It's not the same. It's the same element where like you can feel that like he's really kind of up against a wall, but like
you got his stress. You saw his stress.
You got his stress, and you understood his stress, and then once Nina gets chimeraed here. From that point here, I'm kind of like, okay, like if you decide,
he has no remorse over it.
No remorse because but again, it's also one of those things like, you know what, I'm all in at this point. I just have to do it, and and I might as well just go all in at this point. Which is what happened.
You got how he justified it,
to
what his self justification was, and you got that the stress to him was
earned. Like you felt that he was stressed, and you could understand his. You can understand how
it doesn't make him sympathetic, but it helps you understand how a father could do that. Well, yeah. I still don't understand, but
I don't understand how he would do it. But again, you can see why he broke at the end of the day.
Yeah, and actually, I guess that's the key. You see him as really a broken man.
Yes, and doing all this stuff here. So
and he for me was well chosen.
Yes, I liked him.
I liked the general.
I like the general because like he's not the same General Hakuro that's in the series, because the General Hakuro in the series is actually fairly decent kind of person.
Yeah.
But like nobody in the series who, unless you're a diehard fan, was going to remember who really General Hakuro really was. And so you could have hired any elder statesman actor to be in that role.
But, I mean, I think the way they used that role was pretty decent.
Yeah.
Especially given how many things you had to cut out. So I thought, and I loved Lust.
Oh, I love the way I like all the homunculus here. Like I really do. Like they look like their characters, they act like their characters, they move around like their characters. Like
the visual effects are well done.
Some yes and some no.
Some yes and some no, but okay.
For what it is, I mean, like I think a lot of the visual effects were aping what was
definitely low budget.
It was very low budget, but like they're certainly aping a lot of what was going on here.
But I mean, even in the opening scenes, though, with stuff coming out of the walls and
the concrete kind of moving this kind of wave sort of thing.
Stuff was well done.
Oh no, yeah, no, that was very much kind of how like, hey, if this is what alchemy looks like.
Yeah.
One of my major gripes I have throughout this and what I went through this year was, when you see Ed do his clap.
Yep.
Which is, again, he does a very kind of iconic clap, which almost looks like he's praying.
See, now, I look at it as very much almost a Buddhist thing.
Yes, that too. He claps his hand together, and you don't hear the iconic clap, which you hear in the anime constantly.
Yeah.
What you hear, because again, what you would hear is you would hear this clap, and you would hear kind of this dissonancy sort of echoey effect kind of happening. Like, he clapped, and then like you clap, like you also hit kind of like a bell or some sort of like glass sort of thing, and it kind of does this echoey element here, which signifies that he's done, like he's made his own trend.
He's done some alchemy.
He's doing alchemy here at this point. No, instead it's like this clappage just feels like two gloves. It literally was just two cloth pieces jumping together.
Yeah.
So there's no so like the Foley work in this was also just like, how do you it's the simplest thing in the world. All you have to do is just get the guy to just go, clap. And even if it sounds different every single time, all the better, because at least you hear a clap. And I don't care if he's wearing gloves or not. Like, just have that clap. That clap is so iconic.
Yeah.
And it would mean so much to everybody on there. The other thing that broke me out of a lot of this year were the costumes.
Okay.
Because there were costumes. So as an example, all the military officers are wearing this really bright royal blue costume
with gold trim.
With gold trim and everything on it here. Now, and I already have problems with the military outfits, anyways, because they've got kind of this.
They're not realistic.
They're not realistic, but they have kind of this skirt element that's kind of going on. That's meant to make it look.
It's steampunk, and you have to think back to the time.
And again, I can appreciate a lot of that, but like, I would kind of assume that if you were the military, this would be more of a little bit more subdued. You know, still have kind of maybe the gold trim on there, or maybe some like leathery trim on there, but then have like
so ostentatious.
Not so ostentatious, more like a deeper, richer navy blue sort of thing.
Yeah,
because that's kind of always what I saw. I always saw
the marine blue, which is at least a tone down, not bright.
Yeah, it's aiming more toward black, but it's really more bluish.
Yeah.
I would have thought that, and I would have thought Ed's coat wouldn't be quite so crimson red. I would have thought it would have been like more more leathery duster kind of, which was like that. Just kind of like dyed red a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I was expecting that to be a lot more leathery looking, and it was just so bright red. Like, if anything, like when we saw Gluttony, Envy, and Lust, like there was like, okay, I want that to look.
Spot on.
I want that to look like a costume because, like, again, like I just can't get over the fact that like you see it, you like, it looks so great. It's like I'm almost certain like Arakawa when she saw it was just like, that's what it would look like in real life because I
love the way all the, what do you call those? The arms?
Which arms? Oh, the little tendrils or something?
Yeah.
I like that too. I think what they actually did was here, and
I'm standing here as if all of you can see me.
Moving our arms
Moving
around.
my arms around. So I thought that those things were done really well. I like Gluttony's mouth.
Oh, the way again, the CGI for that is really cool. The way he walks around, and he's kind of a teddy bear, kind of walking forward towards you, is a little weird. But
it reminded me of Uncle Fester.
Oh yes, yeah. And again, I mean, like if they cast Christopher Lloyd in that role, I think it would be amazing. but again, Christopher Lloyd, circa like 1990.
Yeah, no, Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd.
Oh no, Adam's Family, Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Again, he is Fester in that.
Yeah.
So there's that. One of the things that really kind of bothered me here, and it would have been so easily doable here. Why is there not a suit actor for Al? Al is almost so. What's interesting here is that they went through all the process of getting somebody to do mocap for Al.
Yes.
So somebody went in and did all the mocap work for Al, and they digitized him in there, so he's got all the right movements, and he moves around like a human being would, and everything.
Yeah. So for a suit of armor, it's pretty supple.
For a suit of armor, it's there. But there's scenes where you can clearly see, no, this is a CGI thing. It doesn't move right.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of here, and I think it would have been very easy to. I know, like it would have been a cost to it here.
Sort of a C-3PO thing.
Well, not even so much a C-3PO sort of thing. I mean, like, I think you could have had somebody who, again, keep in mind, this is also the place where you have the Power Rangers shot, where you have Kamen Riders shot. It's not that difficult to go to Toei and ask Toei, hey, could you make us an Ed costume? And even better is that, like, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people have already made the costume themselves for cosplay. So it's very, and I've seen somebody with an actual Al costume that moves around and does all the kicks and everything. Now, is it going to be as all the same movement you would typically get out of that? No, but this is also a suit of armor. So you're not going to expect this suit of armor to do a roundhouse kick.
Yeah.
But you would want him to at least be able to lift up his leg and punch kick forward even.
Yeah.
And again, like all you would have to do is just get kind of a really tall person and just have them shake their head around a lot. Especially in the close-ups, for that. And I found this fascinating that
they did it for Chewie.
Well, not so much for Chewie. I mean, like there are tall people in Japan, and you could bring a guy in to be a tall person.
Do we know where this was filmed?
So a majority of this was actually filmed in Japan, and some of the settings that we see there are actually from theme parks.
I wondered about that because. They take you through old villages, and they're very dated looking. They reminded me of
all the set dressings and everything are spot on.
Yeah, so it reminded me a lot of Hoi An, which is a village that's historically preserved in Vietnam.
And some of that could have been shot there too, I would imagine. I know for one of the scenes where, like, when they first get to East City and they're showing the base here at the end of the day when
Yeah.
when you first get up to there, that's from a theme park.
Okay.
That's from Japan has a quite, for the size that Japan is, there is a lot of theme parks in Japan.
Yeah.
A lot of it is trying to ape obviously the Disneyland aesthetic here.
But they have a thing for dressing up in cosplay too.
Yeah.
They take that seriously,
There's
as does Korea, and so they're outside of these things are all these rental places where you can rent whatever you want to be for the day.
I feel a little guilty when we came back from Japan and we were like, you would ask, hey, do you want to dress up in kimonos? And I was like, no, that seems a little weird. And at the time I thought so, but now I look at it now, it's like, no, I should have done it.
There were places that would do you full up as a geisha with the makeup and the wig and everything. I would have loved to have done that.
Yeah, and again, the only reason I think
so. If you go, I would suggest you do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Although if you do it there, like figure out where you're going for the day. We were jumping around quite a bit, so that was kind of I think one of the reasons why I didn't want to do it.
Because you would have had the costume on for a couple of hours and then turned it back.
Well, I wouldn't mind having if we went through like Fushinari in the costume.
That
and everything
cool.
for the 2 or 3 hours that we were there, I would have been cool with that. But I also don't feel like I would have wanted to. Keep in mind, to get into a Japanese kimono for a woman can take upwards of an hour to do it.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if I would have wanted to.
We were packed.
We were packed. Yeah, if we had if we got to Kyoto and the idea, because the first day we got to Kyoto, we also did a number of things there.
Yeah.
We
did Universal.
No, that was Osaka. So when we got to Kyoto, we did Fushinari almost right away.
Yeah, we did.
And then we also went to do a couple other things here, and then we went to the Manga Museum, and then we also went to the Pokemon store.
Yeah.
And then so by the time we were all done with all that, we literally went back to the station, got our bags.
Yeah.
And then went over to the Ryokan at that point here. So we had a full day at that point.
Yeah.
So understandably, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, in that respect.
Is that the night we did laundry?
No, we did laundry the last night.
Okay.
Which was awesome too.
Which was awesome.
Oh yeah. 20 minutes to do a full load, and it dried it and everything too. We were just like,
it was so cool.
Oh.
But it was fun too.
So, but yeah, going back to Fullmetal Alchemist here, there's also the Zom homunculi, I guess is kind of the best way to put it here.
Yeah.
Is a thing that comes up much, much, much later.
Yeah. They moved things around.
They moved things quite a bit, and so one of the things that comes up in the manga here is that there's 3 rules for state alchemists. They're not allowed to do. They have to follow the military.
Right.
They can't make gold.
Right.
And they can't do human transmutation. Now, the first one obviously is that you want everybody to always follow the military here. If you have military soldiers, you want them to follow the military here at the end of the day. The second one obviously is you don't want to mess up the economy at the end of the day. But the third one here, which is the human transmutation, you don't want to do the human transmutation because obviously it's taboo and you wouldn't want to, and there's a moral thing to that. But the military actually doesn't want you doing the human transmutation thing because they don't want you making an army for yourself to override them.
This plays into the storyline.
And so this plays into the storyline of the movie here, and much later in the manga as well.
Yeah.
Where you've got all these zombie homunculus that are mono-eyed or sometimes maybe 2-eyed, sort of weird creature-ish thingies at the end of the day. So
they're human, but they're not human.
Yeah, there's a reason why I think the movie didn't do very well at the end of the day on Netflix, because it was such. Again, I think this was a movie where, had they done the movie where it was kind of more of a spiritual element to it here, where it wasn't a one-to-one creation, because there's a lot of scenes in here where it was literally you have to do the Nina dog scene, you have to do the iconic this scene.
Well, I can't imagine not doing the Nina dog scene, as dark as it is.
Yeah, but they're literal panel-for-panel shots. It feels like they were trying to have all the iconic shots, and they omit whole characters like the Fuhrer. Because I think they're even just trying to, they were hoping that, if this does well,
the father,
they're going to let's see if we can get a very well respected Japanese actor to come in and play this actual role, so it would be a bigger deal. You know, like if
Yeah.
you had and I don't think he would be good at any of the roles, but you had like a Ken Watanabe kind of come in. You know, like
Yeah.
that would be kind of interesting. Same thing for a lot of like you don't get a lot of like anybody from Jing either. So you don't get Ling, you don't get Lei Fao, you don't get a lot of these other characters that come in at all.
Well, I mean, something has to give. If you're going to fit the storyline into
Movies,
a short movie, something has to give. You can't do everything.
yeah,
But I think it tries to, and I think it tries to do too much of everything. I think if I were to make suggestions for another movie, I would say take one arc, plan to do it as a series, take one story arc, and then build on that for the next one, rather
Yeah.
than trying to accomplish so much
in such a short period of time. Yeah, and again, so it's the way I would kind of recommend that they do it here as well. It would be very similar in the vein of what we call OAVs in Japanese. So you'd have like an hour's worth of story, hour 20 minutes worth of story that came out, and it would end at a certain satisfying point that where the next episode came out. You know, anywhere from 5 to 6 months later, like you would keep going there.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite series, Gundam Unicorn, is the way that they did that over the course of 6 OAV episodes, and like the final 7th episode, which was not an hour, not only was actually more almost 2 hours long.
So now, did you make it all the way through the movie?
Yes, unfortunately.
I did. I watched it in 2 sittings. I watched like an hour and 20 minutes and went, oh God. And
There was a lot of heavy skipping, is what I'll admit.
Oh, okay. So no, I watched all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the last hour. Going, yeah, okay. And but I did watch all of it. You know, the acting was not great.
No, acting was not
The
great.
music was actually the thing that was the most off-putting for me. I resented that they didn't, because I like Winray.
Mm-hmm.
And I resented that they didn't give you any reason to really like Ed. You always like Al. You didn't get because Al was voiced differently. You didn't get as much of a sense of how old Al was.
You felt like he was also a teenager at that point here too, because it was a older voice versus where in the anime it's a very childish sort of voice, which is very much true in the original Japanese dub as well. It's a very childish like voice,
and I actually like that because it reminds
gives you the sense that he was a child when it
he's-
happened.
and he doesn't grow up.
Mm-hmm.
He's forever virtually the same age he was the day that happened.
Yeah.
Whereas Al grows up. So
in one of my big takeaways from this as well is that Al's cut out from a lot of stuff here at the end of the day too.
yeah.
Because you didn't want to put a CGI character in this kind of places at all. Versus again, if and I think there was a budget saving element there where it's like, no, it's Winry and Al that go find Dr. Marco, not Al and Ed
Right.
in there as well. It's also the major lacking of Armstrong, which I think is a disappointing thing in general.
Yeah.
All you needed was just like a really big, again, one of the most fascinating things here I think is that there was a lot of professional wrestlers that are white guys.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be very easy to pull here and make them, be these characters because they speak fluent Japanese. A lot of them do, and so you can have them in those roles. It's one of those reasons why I'm hoping that they never turn Fate Stay Night into this here, because I want them to cast a white person as Saber. I want them to cast,
What is Archer?
I would get a Middle Eastern guy or an Indian guy to be Archer because of the tan skin and everything.
Yeah.
Now, again, if it's a Japanese guy with that's much more tanned by comparison, I would think that would work too because of who Archer is supposed to be at the end of the day. That part works out for me well. But again, like the other characters, I would expect to be period piece in that particular sense. There's a fair amount of foreigners in Japan that would love the fact of coming in here to do these roles, and could very well do them very easily as well. And there's a fair amount of actors that can speak Japanese as well, that are American, European, and stuff like that. Like, it would be a pain in the world if you got a white person to not be Saber at the end of the day, even though because you just wanted to cast an iconic Japanese actress, which I think is a fair thing to do. But you also have like Rin and Sakura to do that as well.
Yeah, you have
other people there.
Yeah.
In this version here, though, and for Full Metal Alchemist, though, like I can understand why it's a purely Japanese cast because the setting in and of itself is a purely more or less Western setting at the end of the day, and so it would be a lot harder to define all these cast members and have them do Japanese.
Yeah.
I think if this were an American production or a European production, I think you could get a lot more. You could get a lot more people that look a lot more accurate to some of these characters and stuff in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that
because the anime, like mini anime, portrays them as very Western.
Portrays them as very Western, but it's also like if you were to put Ed or Al into just regular everyday kind of like modern day Japanese anime, like they wouldn't look too far out.
No, they
out
wouldn't.
there.
As I said, it to me had a very Yu-Gi-Oh look and feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was Fullmetal Alchemist. So the big question, which for a lot of this experiment was, which version did you like better? And I think I know which one you like better is.
Okay, guess.
I think you like the 2003 version.
I do.
Yeah.
Although I really like the manga.
Oh yeah, no, and again, so
the manga is so stylized; it's really pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely, and again, this is what you would get from a monthly series, where again you have, the better part of 2 pages a day versus if you're a traditional. Again, I'd say 2 pages a day, assuming that you're doing it over the course of a month.
Yeah.
And you would lose the weekends.
It's beautifully drawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautifully drawn. Versus where if you're a weekly series, you're doing and you're working probably more like 6 days a week.
Yeah.
You're definitely doing probably about 3 to 4 pages every single day.
Yeah.
To get up to your 20 to 25 page thing that you got to do weekly.
Yeah.
So. But yeah,
so which is your favorite version?
So I actually prefer the 2009 version, but that's also because I
Brotherhood.
I prefer the 2009 Brotherhood series, but because I was able to enjoy the 2003 version first in a lot of those cases. So when I got into the 2009 version, like I already understood the relationship between Ed and Al and Winry, so I didn't feel like I absolutely needed to have a lot of that reinforced for me necessarily.
Okay.
Now in the case here where you going into it cold, I understand why you prefer the 2003 version because the characters have a lot more characters in that particular respect. They feel a lot more deeper and richer. They're a lot more fleshed out. Yes. Yeah. Versus the 2009 version, up from where you stopped at.
Yeah.
Keeps going and it gets better in that particular respect. But if you were just if you were just introduced to it here again, the 2009 version would go really quick and you wouldn't understand or feel this relationship that you had for the characters. Yeah. But I still do just enjoy reading the manga because again, it's one of those things where you can kind of put it down as okay.
Yeah.
And go from there.
Yep. Exactly.
So I have an idea for next week.
Okay.
It'll be weird.
Oh, I like weird.
Oh yeah, I know. But it's a big thing that's kind of happening. Big news, or something that's become very popular in the last couple months, or since I think quarantine really happened necessarily.
Okay.
So hopefully we can dive a little bit more into that.
Okay.
And there will be kind of a cool experiment that'll come out of that as well.
Okay.
So we have all these show notes will be posted on our website at thenerdtutorialpodcast.com, where you can read it there and all of our previous episodes. We do continue the conversation as well at our Facebook group at facebook.com/nerdtutorialpodcast, all is one word. And then if you want to follow along with the conversation with me, or you want to recommend ideas for future stuff, or see just some of the updates for stuff that's come out for all of our older episodes and topics, you can follow me on Twitter at nerd_tutorial and let me know what you think of episodes there, or just see what new news is coming out about different properties. So on behalf of myself and my mom, we hope that you guys stay safe out there in these weird times. And we'll see you guys again next time.
Bye.